During the Second World War, the remote Ramree Island, a forsaken landmass in the turbid waters of the Bay of Bengal, was the scene of one of the war's darkest events. This Burmese island was vital strategically and provided a linchpin for the region's maritime control. But lurking beneath the water's surface were creatures that would become a nightmare for the Japanese soldiers. The Japanese arrival on Ramree was not met with much resistance. With its mangrove topography and thick jungle, the island was sparsely inhabited and offered ideal natural defense options. The Japanese soldiers rapidly adapted to the environment and prepared for any invasion attempt, conscious of the island's strategic importance in controlling sea routes and defending the wider Japanese territory. By January 1945, the waters near Ramree Island bore witness to the distant roar of engines. A fleet of Allied ships breached the horizon. The British forces, escorted by Indian units of soldiers, were bent on reclaiming Ramree. The battle was initially marked by heavy naval and aerial bombardment by the Allies, designed to weaken the Japanese defenses before the landings. While the Japanese forces were thoroughly trained, they were completely taken by surprise by the magnitude and precision of the attack. Yet they fought back with fierce resistance, resorting to their fortified positions to deal heavy casualties to the attackers. With the break of dawn, the Allies made their landing on the Ramree beaches. British and Indian soldiers pushed forward under heavy fire, encountering landmines and fierce shooting. Every meter of ground gained tested their courage and resilience under the most adverse conditions. As the battle intensified, the Japanese forces started to retreat into the island's hinterland, using guerrilla tactics to stall the Allied advance. This stage of the battle was characterized by hand-to-hand combat, ambushes, and a death-defying cat-and-mouse standoff. The difficult terrain, together with the suffocating heat and humidity, tested the physical and mental limits of the soldiers on both sides. The Japanese defensive tactics were ruthless and effective, seriously hampering the invaders. But the Allies' numerical and logistical supremacy was beginning to turn the tide in their favor. Notwithstanding fierce resistance, the Japanese forces were gradually being surrounded and isolated, their supply lines cut off. This initial period of the battle, while having its share of strategic success for the Allies, was marred by brutality and a human cost that heralded the horrors that lay ahead in the fight for Ramree Island. The Japanese soldiers desperately decided to ring the retreat bell. They ran towards the mangroves, expecting the British to stop their pursuit. But the soldiers quickly learned that those waters harbored enemies even more ruthless than the armed men who followed them. These mangroves stretched out like a swampy labyrinth, a patchwork of roots and mud, beneath an oppressively heavy sky. While the Japanese ventured deeper, the feeling of isolation grew. The dense vegetation and stagnant water hid lurking dangers. Eerie sounds broke the silence, and, with every step, the treacherous terrain seemed to swallow them up. The blistering heat and humidity made retreating a grueling chore, setting the stage for a night that would go down forever in the annals of war as a pure horror story. Night fell over Ramree with thick darkness, bringing with it the nightmare. From the Mangrove Shadows, reptilian eyes glittered with an ancient appetite. Giant crocodiles emerged silently from the dark waters. The ensuing scene was a horrific symphony as these beasts started their sinister banquet. Exhausted and bewildered, the Japanese soldiers could hardly believe their eyes and ears. Terrified squeals ripped through the night, each one signaling another fate sealed in the unforgiving jaws of these predators. Once a mere obstacle, the water became a slaughter ground. The psychological terror, just as palpable as the physical attacks, raged like wildfire. Some soldiers fought frantically against the beasts, while others were immobilized by fear, their minds powerless to deal with their distorted reality. As dawn finally broke, the mangrove swamp was a hushed testament to the night's massacre. The few surviving Japanese soldiers, battered and shaken, found themselves in an utterly chaotic condition. A battle between men had turned into a desperate struggle for survival. Driven by a primitive instinct, these warriors searched for strategies to escape the predators and the natural labyrinth in which they were trapped. Some took the risk of swimming across infested waters, while others sought refuge on tiny islets. Each decision was a wager between life and a terrible death. Haunted by the previous night's events, the soldiers pressed on, driven by the simple will to live. Historical accounts vary, but estimates indicate that only 500 of the 1,000 men who entered the swamp survived the appalling undertaking. The remainder met a tragic end, victims of both the hostile conditions and the region's natural predators. This terrifying night was subsequently identified as one of the largest crocodile attacks on humans in history. The trauma for the few survivors was long-lasting and profound. They came out of the mangroves not only physically depleted, but also psychologically devastated. The horror of witnessing comrades being swept to their deaths by the murky waters, the feeling of helplessness before an unrelenting non-human enemy, and the ever-present threat to their own lives left scars that went beyond physical wounds. With its grim outcome and the gruesome losses suffered by the Japanese, the Battle of Ramree Island is a haunting reminder of the horrors of war and nature's unpredictable hazards. The survivors bore with them not only the battle scars, but also the memories of a hard-fought struggle for survival against almost unbelievable odds.